Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek The Next Generation, Season 7, Episode 7. It's called Dark Page, i.e. what happens when Connor upsets his girlfriend.
Fiance, thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, fiance.
Did spend all that money for nothing.
That's what you're upset about, that you spent a fortune on an engagement ring, and you're upset that the title, appropriate title's not been used.
Yeah. You put some respect on this.
I can't be, but fiance's so temporary. Who gives a shit? Like I'll get used to wife when it's wife, but until then...
That's fine, but also, I hadn't used the word girlfriend in years, primarily because, you know, the relationship was past the 10-year point. Girlfriend sounded a bit like... At that point, it doesn't sound enough. So we were using partner anyway.
Okay. Was this the motivation to propose? You know what? It's getting on a bit. I should probably do it now.
No, it was not.
Oh, dear. Yeah. Yes. For anyone who's not getting the joke here, Connor's fiancé is named Paige.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, so... I thought it was a good joke personally, but
yeah. It's not your worst, not your best, but not your worst.
It was a spur of the moment. I didn't have it planned. I read the title, looked at you, and went, "Oh, there's a joke here."
It's a convenient name for jokes like this because it's a pretty common word, right?
There's a lot of uses. Yeah. You can make a lot of book-based puns and jokes. There's I mean, pagers at least are gone. You can't make any pager jokes, but. Once upon a time.
There was a brief time where that would have worked.
What, when you were dating at the age of 7?
I didn't mean in our relationship. I meant a brief time in the world's history where that would have worked. Because they were not a particularly long-lived piece of technology, really, were they?
I mean, no, in the grand scheme of things, no. But anywho, this is a Star Trek discussion show we're here for. I got sidetracked there. So this is an episode about Lwaxana Troi, Deanna Troi's mother. I almost said Donna Troy. I almost just simplified it.
That's a different character entirely.
Yes. So basically, there's this new alien race. New to the Federation, right? Interacting wise. And they are a telepathic race who don't normally communicate verbally. In fact, they get little voice processor things implanted so they can actually speak to other races. But to teach them how to speak verbally, they're using a Betazoid. As Picard delightfully puts it in his log at the start of the episode, he just says, a friend, and there's like a heavy, you can almost hear the air quotes as he says the word friend, and then it cuts to Lwaxana Troi. She's the sort of the ambassador here, working with them because she can communicate telepathically because of her Betazoid heritage,
and she is technically a diplomat.
Technically, yeah. So she's helping with that, but they're learning how to talk, and we see a little Kirsten Dunst. She's like a little kid in this alien race, and we hear her. They sound like they've got it's basically just a filter in the audio track to make them sound kind of robotic, but it's like they're speaking through like a little voice box.
It's funny with her, like, you know how some people you see a picture of them as a kid and you're like, nope, can't see it. Her, it's very obvious it's still her, right?
It is, but I wonder if that's because I'm actually used to her just being a little older, because I knew her from Jumanji and Small Soldiers, which were both pretty soon after this, so she's just a little bit older than those.
Okay, I'd have seen... I saw Small Soldiers at the time, but... I don't know, because I can just see her face, and it's like really obvious.
I mean, I can too. I'm just suggesting that because I've grown up with her, if you will, seeing her at various ages, that I like it's easier than someone that I didn't see, through
it's definitely
the years.
Possible, but also for me, like, I wouldn't have known who she was back then, and I would not have connected those dots, a decade later, whatever it was.
Oh yeah, that's fair. She's not got a huge role in this. She's got a reasonable amount of screen time, all things considered, but it's not a huge important role in and of itself. Other than she kind of symbolizes someone else in Lwaxana Troi's past, so she kind of represents her inner dream until.
Yeah, I think she has kind of a lot to do for a child actor, especially on on these shows that we've seen, and I mean younger than than we've had with Wesley Crusher. Because you have her as herself in the real world, and then you have the dream representation, which is a very different personality that she's portraying. So we tend to not see the child actors given that much on these shows.
Yeah. So looks like tries to set Deanna up with the main guy, the main alien of this group, who, because he's only learned so many words, he kind of speaks, he doesn't really know every word, so there's a lot of times where he'll sort of like try to say something and then struggle because he doesn't know which word to say. He's still learning how to speak verbally, so there's kind of a flirtation of a romance to an extent, but that's not really what the episode's about. It kind of becomes more about Mama Troy getting sick. She starts getting these migraines, which she sort of just ignores at first. She says she's okay, she's just tired because she's been doing a lot of telepathy, more than usual, working with these aliens. But then she eventually
kind of backs that up as well. She's like, yeah, your levels of this are a bit low. Just ease up on the telepathy for a few days, and it'll come back. You'll be fine. Yeah,
it makes sense that Betazoids don't use it as constant as this alien, because this alien race, they only communicate with telepathy, so that's just all they do.
Yeah.
Whereas Betazoids still speak verbally, so it makes sense that they're mostly still doing that. And I guess it's kind of similar to us, like I don't know. What's something we use occasionally, but not all the time, or we'd get like really tired from it?
I took it as it's like a muscle. So it's like the muscles in your legs. Like, we walk around all day. Most of us can be on our feet for 8-10 hours, and it's fine. But if you have to then run all day instead of walk, suddenly that's borderline impossible for most people. Whereas I think that's the equivalent here. It's she's gone from using it casually but regularly to using it intensely all the time.
Yeah. So she collapses and everyone sort of freaks out, like what's going on, and they try and scan her and whatnot, and nothing physically is showing up. Nothing is physically saying this should be happening to her. So the question is, this all this extra telepathic work she's doing, is it something to do with that? And it shouldn't be. Like, there's no reason why it should be physically causing her any harm. And even Deanna Troy a couple times tries to communicate telepathically, and she struggles because she's only half Betazoid. So she, it's not as easy for her.
It's just a lot for her, yeah.
Yeah. But what it actually ends up turning into is that all of this extra telepathic activity has breached like a safety lock in her mind. She basically compartmentalized an entire period of her history that was too traumatic. It's like a traumatic memory effectively, but it's a big one. It's like 7 years, because it was too much pain, and the unlocking of that and it kind of flooding back into her mind is what's doing this to her. So she's in this coma, and the episode for the second half is largely about Deanna using the alien dude to telepathically send her into her head, Inception style, to try and find the root of the problem and discover why, what these bad memories are that are causing this.
Yeah,
so
definitely not your standard Mama Troy comedy episode. This is actually dealing with pretty serious subjects.
Yeah, which unfortunately is its downfall. Like, I'm not saying I don't like any of it. Like, I think there's a couple of little stylistic choices that I don't mind towards the end, but like the start of the episode where it's like Troy talking to Picard, and Picard clearly is just wanting the conversation to end, and there's a point where Troy says, yeah, because they communicate telepathically, their conversations are so much quicker. Like, if I was talking to one of these aliens right now, the conversation would have been done minutes ago. And Picard's eyes light up like, really? Oh,
that must be lovely.
Sadly,
her insulting Worf and Riker immediately after.
Oh yeah, they can't communicate because Worf is feeling, he doesn't like telepaths, he doesn't like the idea that someone can read his mind, and she's like, oh, don't worry, they can't read your mind even if they wanted to, because it's not developed enough. And it's like,
yeah, and Riker's laughing at him.
Yeah, and then she says, that means you too, Riker. They can only communicate with other telepaths. You're both ill-equipped. And this is all fun enough. It's doing its thing. Once it gets serious, though, and it's very much a, it's very much a it's a, the daughter's sitting by her hospital bed, worrying and trying to problem solve a bit as well, but all the jokes, like the humor, just goes out the window. There's not a shred of light-hearted quality to the rest of the episode, because it's all about trying to save someone's life and how dangerous it is and all that.
It's a no-win scenario, right? Because if it was still peppered with jokes, it completely undermines what they're trying to do, and we'd be complaining that, hey, you're completely undercutting your premise here. But because there's an expectation with Armor Troy episodes. This episode even opens with that, and it plays up knowing that's what the audience expects, and then to veer away from them so sharply it's a bit disappointing, because I don't think the rest of the episode's terrible, for the record. I don't think it's like the worst.
No, I kind of disagree with what you're saying to a point. I think that there's actually almost a genius to taking a character who we associate with comic relief and then putting them in jeopardy, for it to feel like the audience is going to really latch onto them and really hope that they get saved. So they'll care more, they'll be more invested in the potential. I don't think my issue with this is that it subverts what a Mama Troy episode is necessarily. I think my problem is that it subverts it, but then what it actually is kind of dull for the most part. Like I say, there's some interesting stuff towards the end. Like I think the choice towards the end, as we learn that the memory she's repressed, and the reason why she wiped 7 years of her data entries from her log, is because she had another child, right? Deanna had a sister that she didn't know she had.
Older sister.
An older sister, yeah. So it makes sense she doesn't remember, because she's like a baby. She's like 1 when this happens. Yeah. But, it sounds like some sort of Pet Cemetery style thing happened where the sister chased after the dog, something bad went down. And I think there's an interesting thing is when we first find out that there was a sister, it's Kirsten Dunst that's representing the sister. Obviously, that wasn't really who the sister was, but it's this idea that our mind is kind of sugarcoating that a little bit. But when Troy goes back in again afterwards to try and talk to her really about the issue and save her, when the sister shows up, as Mama Troy starts to accept that she has to kind of deal with this memory, the sister shows up again, but this time it's, presumably the real sister. It's what she really looked like. It's a different actress playing her. And I thought that was a really cool little choice that it changed at that point. I thought that was a nice creative choice that I understood, and I got that. It's just a lot of the problem solving and a lot of the conversations about trying to help her kind of boiled down to like just talking to the alien dude and asking him what he thinks, and then him struggling to say what he thinks because he doesn't really speak, and it taking a bit longer to get to the point because of that. And then on top of that, there's also like a couple of times where they try to make us like mistrust him. It's like, oh, why were you in the med bay with Mama Troy when no one was watching? And it's like, oh, I was just trying to help her. And it's like, okay, well, we'll just continue that. It's not as always like, what was the point of that?
Yeah, I think the problem is because they always just take his word for it, and I mean they are right to, because he is just trying to help.
Oh yeah, there's actually nothing in the episode that suggests he was ever doing anything malicious. So
no, I'm fully willing to believe he was just trying to help, but also the fact that okay, if we're gonna frame it like that, and then we're gonna question him, but then everyone just goes, oh okay, that's fine. Then it kind of feels like a bit of a waste of time.
Yeah,
we're not gonna have anyone doubt it.
I think what I was expecting when the episode was like, a third in, and it was starting to play out that Mama Troy was getting ill and she was moving into the coma by that point, I was thinking, oh, maybe the conundrum that's going to come up from this is that all this work with these telepaths is actually hurting her, and there's going to be maybe a moral choice that needs to be made about whether or not we can actually even communicate with these people, because it is actually dangerous to everyone else. But they actually clarify a little bit later that no, it's not them that's causing this. It's not even anything to do with them, really. It's just a happenstance because she's locked up this memory in her brain.
They happen to have prodded at the dark place, as he puts it, completely coincidentally. And there are things I like in hindsight, like the final inciting incident actually having nothing to do with the telepathy, even though it's right after she uses the telepathy, so that's what it looks like. They're showing them around the gardens, and Troy's explaining poetry and.
Oh, yeah, this is what makes her to actually go into the coma. This is what makes her collapse.
The very final moment is Mama Troy uses a telepathy even though she's been banned, and then Kirsten Dunst actually, she's just wandering around the pond and she kind of like slightly falls in, completely fine. Like, just, loses balance, goes in, stands back up. But I think the idea of, the child falling in water, being the thing that actually triggers it at the end. But that's not something that you're, at that point in the time, when you're watching it, is played as, it was the overuse of the telepathy still. So I think there are nice things in there that I think probably actually play quite well on a rewatch for something of this episode.
I agree. I didn't really think about that, but that is nice in hindsight. I don't think it. I don't think it helps the back half of the episode and everything that comes after, but I do agree that, again, much like I was talking about later with changing the actress, I think both those are good little choices that help tell the story they're telling. I think the problem is that I was expecting there to be another element to the story that was a conflict or a hard choice, and there never really was. It was the entire drama hinges all just around trying to save her and wake her up, and there's never any element of we're sacrificing something to do this, or we're risking something else to do this, or or anything like that.
I think it does need something a little more with the other race, the telepaths, because it opens up when she's told to stop using her telepathy. She's like, well, I can't do that. We're only like 3 days away from the big moments and all the important meetings, and they need to be ready. And if I'm not there to teach them as much as possible in these last few days, this could go really badly. And then it's never really brought up again by the end of the episode.
No, it never does. I think maybe this is too similar to something they've done before or something, and that's why I'm thinking of this as an example, but maybe they are also genuinely worried that they've caused this, and maybe they try and back away diplomatically, and perhaps the main alien dude kind of breaks his own people's rules to come and try and help. Like, maybe that's how you add a bit more drama to it, is that he's trying to go above and beyond to help her when he's supposed to not to. Something like that, just to give it a little bit more actual drama on the way to the solution, because it felt like it was mostly just them sitting around theorizing, or Picard sitting with Deanna looking at her audio logs and sort of talking about what could be there and things like that.
He basically became just a plot device as to why they could get inside her head. Yeah.
He's not. Yeah, that's a good point. In the second half of the episode, he's not really a character anymore. He is just there to serve a function. He doesn't have like a conclusion to his story, which, maybe you could, because when he goes to see Troy, Deanna, that is, after the first interaction, which was awkward because it was like a setup from the mum to,
classic Mama Troy.
Your mum tells me you need something. Oh, she did? Yes, what's the word? Husband, right? Very, that was funny, right? It's awkward, all the rest of it. And he comes to see her the next day, and he's actually there to talk about how, it's kind of weird that your mum has this weird dark space in her head that I can't go into. She calls it privacy. And Deanna goes on to explain what privacy is, because this race of people, these aliens, they don't have that. They just kind of like share everything all the time, so they don't have anything they conceal. And again, like I thought what this was opening the episode up to is that regardless of whatever the A-plot is going to be, is that he's going to learn something about respecting privacy by the end. And again, that doesn't really ever go anywhere or has anything come from it. Because it felt like a good theme to introduce, like this idea of, you have to be able to respect the privacy when you're not used to having to do it because your culture doesn't.
I think that could have been a really interesting angle to go down. Like you say, them joining the Federation and being like, hey, we don't understand this. Not really, because it's such a alien concept to them. And there'll be on the other hand, you'll have, the Federation be like, well, we're accepting, this is your way. We can't expect you to be perfect at our methods immediately, but also privacy is kind of a big deal for us.
Yeah. Because Deanna tries to explain it and says, pretty much everyone in the Federation, not just humans, but everyone has a sense of privacy. It's important to most races to have that. And like that seemed like a really interesting subject to tackle. And sadly, after this, it never, like, maybe they could have brought it up in the sense of, are we invading Luxwana Troy's privacy by even trying to save her like this when she doesn't want to be saved? Are we invading a barrier that we shouldn't be looking into right now?
Even when they just, before they go into her head, when they're just like, I think it's after they go into her head the first time, but when they're like, right, let's get all her diaries and just start going through it. Yeah, like, that's kind of an invasion of privacy as it is. Again, there are exceptional circumstances here in which they're trying to save her life, but it's never even brought up as a question as to, should we just go through her diaries? Is that right? Would
have been nice for just one of them to say, something like, oh, like, it's a shame we shouldn't feel, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but we have to save her. Like, just at least acknowledge that they're crossing a line here that they understand. I will say, though, you reminded me of a line that I did actually appreciate. It was an odd, but a rare example of a reference to a recent episode that I thought worked quite well, is when Deanna's describing all the things she saw in Luxmana's head, Data jumps in after they sit and theorize about what everything is, and he goes, hey, I've recently learned that not everything in a dream is literal. Sometimes it just represents something in to the person or in their head. And they go, actually, Data, that's a really good point. We're taking this very literal. And then sure enough, it turns out that the little girl represents this dead daughter that we didn't know about. So I like that detail. Again, there's a lot of detail that I like.
I think there's a lot of little things in this episode where I'm like, oh, I see what they were going for. I really like these ideas. But it just doesn't quite come together as an episode by the end. Again, not in a terrible way. It's not a disaster. Like, far from it. But it's just missing a few elements to kind of really make it a good story by the end.
Yeah, I suppose one thing we should talk about as well is that when she's in her mum's head, she sees her father. So we actually get an actor cast as Daddy Troy, I guess.
Yeah.
We'll call him. And Deanna realizes quite quickly that she's emotional and it's kind of a big deal seeing him, but she does realize, hey, you're not really my dad. You're just kind of someone in my mum's head. You're just a part of her, effectively. But they set it up so that later when she sees the photograph of him and it's like, these memories of both. It's almost like she's kind of wanting to forget her husband as well because the husband reminds her of her daughter. So it's kind of this, connective thing, which makes some sense. Yeah, kind of
all the things, other than the first attempt with Picard, all the things are connected to the other daughter, right? You have obviously the daughter herself, the dog. Again, it's a different type of dog. It's a bigger, quote unquote, scarier dog, right? In the representation, and then it's the husband. They're all directly connected to the event.
Yeah. It makes sense Picard's the first one because Picard's effectively used, and this is in Mama Troy's head. It's like Picard tries to order Troy to stop investigating, and it makes sense to use Picard because that's our superior officer. That's like, oh, your captain's telling you to stop something. So it's almost like it's using the most obvious thing first to try and get her to stop, and then it starts using these things from the memory itself, the dog, the daughter, so on.
In a way, it's almost the most effective one because she does question it at first. She's like, oh, you told me from sickbay. And Picard's like, yep, of course I am. And,
yes.
Yeah, obviously. Well, where else would I be calling you from?
Yeah. So I think it's just the mechanic of actually doing this that's not that exciting. And all the theorizing in between isn't that interesting for the most part. And I think that's really lets down the pacing of most of this episode.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So, hey. But not the worst either. Like, I think it's got interesting ideas, but it definitely is a overall a bit disjointed and never kind of comes together completely. So that is Dark Page. We'll look ahead and see what's coming next time on The Next Generation. It's an episode called Attached. Here's the description on IMDb. Captain Picard and Dr. Crusher discover things about one another when they are captured by an opposing alien race. Due to the fact that the Enterprise has come to allow the planet's other civilization the choice of being a part of the Federation. Okay, that's interesting. So there's two sides on a planet. One's going to join the Federation, and then the other side's like, wait a minute, you're siding with them? Well, we're not okay with that. So yeah, I can see the drama from that.
I can see that being interesting. The idea of, oh, hang on, you're kind of dragging our whole planet into the Federation by default, and not all of us want that. There's definitely an interesting episode in that premise. Whether or not this will be one, who knows? But
definitely potential. So when we get back to Next Gen, that's what the episode we'll be doing. Obviously, next week we'll be looking at a Deep Space Nine episode. So although we're almost at the point where they're not just going to be neatly alternating. I think after episode 10 of each, I think there's a couple of doubles of one or the other. So we'll tangle that mess when we get to it. But that's our thoughts on this Next Generation episode. So let us know what you thought of the ep in the comments below. You can, of course, hit the like button. It helps out a bunch. It's free to do. It helps people find the channel and the reviews, so please hit the button. And, of course, if you want to go above and beyond, you can go over to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and get some bonuses for your trouble, including my monthly Columbo reviews, if you're so inclined, for another slice of classic TV. But also check out all the movie podcasts, including the sci-fi movie podcast, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, which is over on MailFuzz Movies. But that's us, so thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and Beverly Crusher's probably repressed every memory she has of Wesley.